Today, comparing New Zealand and Ireland property markets, what can we learn? Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to our latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian and New Zealand perspective. Today, I'm joined again by Joseph Wilkes. Hello, Joseph.
Hello, Martin. How are you?
Very good. Good to see you again. And are we going to do some comparative work today between what's happening in New Zealand and what happened in Ireland? Because you have a theory that there are some interesting connections and interesting resonances.
Yeah, well, we discussed it in our last post, and I was a bit reluctant to sort of go into it without doing some proper work on it. And do you know what? Conveniently, New Zealand are playing Ireland this weekend, so
yeah,
I thought
it totally appropriate.
It could be quite a good time to have a little game of Ireland versus New Zealand.
Okay.
I've got some stats and some data that are based and geared around the build up to the Irish boom, and I think I'm hoping that everybody here and our readership know that Ireland has had a very challenging 10 years. They had a wonderful boom, the Celtic Tiger, that took over the world in the 2000s. Big growth in GDP, big growth in asset prices, property market, bank lending, bubble, bust, recession, and really doldrums for a number of years, albeit they're trying to inflate their way out of it at the moment. Now, from my perspective, there's lots of little similarities. I know we're in the South Pacific and Ireland's up in, closer to Europe and I suppose closer to more markets. Population's similar size. They've got I guess 4.5 million people. We're close to 4.9. So what I thought I'd do is just run through some numbers, provide our audience with some data, and let them make their own mind up. But because we have got rugby match this weekend, I've worn my Lions jersey. This is not because I'm supporting Ireland. I'm a New Zealander now. I've got three children who all support New Zealand and a wife who's a New Zealander. It's not because England lost at the weekend either. So I just want to get that down there as this judgment. But what I thought we'd do is just play a game where we will score depending on who wins on the badness stakes. We'll give people. We won't worry about tries today. We'll just go for penalties, I think. So we'll score 3 points. If you're happy to run a total for me, and then we'll decide where we are at the end of it.
All right.
A lot of this data has been gathered from various sources. I've used a lot of trading economics data, which is they're quite useful all over the world. We're going to look at a number of things today. We're going to look at population growth. We're going to look at GDP. We're going to look at government debt. We're going to look at new building charts. We're going to look at growth in household income. We're going to look at balance of trade. We're going to look at a number of things. So I'll just run through them if you're happy with me sort of going through and you don't mind keeping score.
Yep, score is running.
Okay, well, first of all, Ireland, lead up to their bust, 2004 to 2008, they had an increase in population of 500,000 people in 4 years. The population grew from 4 to 4.5 million, which is a 12.5% increase during the credit boom. And there's always a lot of discussion around New Zealand about house prices will never fall because we've got an increase in population. Ireland had a very big increase in population. That's a 12.5% increase in 4 years. New Zealand, population growth, 4.4 million in 2011 to 4.9 million in 2018. So they too added 500,000 people. And I've just worked on the 500,000 number to just keep it similar, which is an 11.3% population increase. What's forgotten as well is that the population in New Zealand was, I think, 3.7 million in 2006, which was at the height of their, I suppose, a couple of years before the credit crunch started. This is a pretty close one to call, Martin. So I think they're probably penalty of 3 each there. There's not a lot between them.
Okay, 3, good.
For those that want to think about, okay, we've got a rising population, so house prices can't fall. Again, trading economics, the Australian population growth, and I've used the same period as I have done for New Zealand, 2011 to 2018, Australian population grew from 20.52 million to 24.7 million, which is a 20% increase in 6 years. And what's happening to house prices?
They do seem to be falling just at the moment.
Okay,
and about half of that population growth, slightly more, was actually from migration. The rest was actually home build, as it were. So more from migration than locally.
Okay, but it would suggest that population doesn't always prevent a correction in the housing market. Okay.
Exactly, and that, of course, flies in the face of what many commentators always argue, which is, well, of course, there's a floor on prices because the population will always grow, and it's not true. Yeah.
No. So the next thing that I thought, I think we've got a 3-3 score so far. Yep. The next thing that I wanted to look at was the household debt to GDP ratio, and compare Ireland at the point that they went into their housing bust and New Zealand today. So if you look at the GDP growth, in 2007 in Ireland, the debt to GDP, household debt to GDP, went over 90%. It continued rising in the bust, but it went over 90%, and that, for that size of population, I don't know if these are just thoughts, that was too much for the economy to sustain the debt levels, and they've had a very, very challenging 10 years since. New Zealand, and if you, again, you hopefully provide the graphs for this, which I've sent over, yep. Went over 90% household debt to GDP in 2016. Which is when everybody's saying that the Auckland market went flat. Now, we discussed the marginal buyer, the foreign buyer, in our post the other day. I have a feeling that marginal buyer may have been providing the liquidity to replace the debt to GDP levels, which are a big issue today. So make of it what you will, but I would say that if you look at that comparison, it's 3-3 again. Looks
like it, doesn't it? Yes. Okay, 3-3.
Okay, New Zealand building charts. Now, there's all this talk in New Zealand about there's a housing shortage, there's a housing crisis. There's actually been a boom in building consent since 2012, and this is not publicised or spoken about by the mainstream media. But since 2012, we've seen monthly household building consents rise from 1,000 per month to over 2,500 a month, and seem to be peaking or flatlining now. Ireland building charts pre-crunch, their building boom was massive, and I have to concede here that they do win. They were building they were seeing building consents of 4,000 to 5,000 a month at the height of their boom, and it rose fairly consistently from 2000 all the way through to 2007, and it's flatlined since. Yeah, well, I'll have to give Ireland a head start on that, so they can have 3 and New Zealand can have none.
Okay.
Not that there hasn't been a building boom, it's just that Ireland's was slightly greater.
Sure, okay.
GDP. Ireland GDP in 2007 was 260 billion euros. Today, the GDP is 340 billion euros. So they've had a credit crisis and a crunch, a recession, and more debt, and have got slightly higher GDP today at 340 billion. So that 260 billion in 2007 compares to New Zealand's 140 billion GDP, so much smaller economy in 2007. And today, again, a very, very small focused economy, and I'm not saying that we're irrelevant, but we're below 50 in the OECD GDP sizes, but the GDP today is just 200 billion. So our protection from a crisis is a lot smaller, and it's possibly more focused on property, and we'll come to that later. So I think that I'll probably give Ireland the benefit here and New Zealand the points. So the 3-point penalty for New Zealand.
Done. Okay.
What score are we at the moment?
Well, at the moment you've got with New Zealand with 9 and Ireland with 9, so it's a tie.
It's very close, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Money supply in New Zealand. There has been a growth in the money supply, M3, from 158 billion to 300 billion in 10 years. For commentators who have been to the investment seminars and been told that house prices double every 10 years, that's what happens when money supply doubles in 10 years.
Yep.
Ireland's M3 was very, very dramatic. In fact, they doubled their money supply between 2004 and 2007. So Ireland get the points for doubling of money supply more quickly. But New Zealand's has happened as well. So there's been an explosion.
So I'm giving 0 to New Zealand, 3 to Ireland. Is that
Yeah, no, yep. They deserve a penalty for that.
Right.
Balance of trade. This I found really, really interesting, actually. Ireland generally run a trade surplus. The size of that trade surplus reduced from 2000 to 2007, but they pretty much ran a trade surplus all the way through the crisis and onwards. So they are able to generate cash from the world because they've got goods, services, and are providing things that everybody wants. In contrast, New Zealand, from a balance of trade perspective, we don't have a leg to stand on. If you look at the chart and max the tab out, they've run a trade deficit for decades, and recently we've seen $1 billion monthly trade deficits. So we're importing far more than we're exporting. People always say, "Well, New Zealand's an export-led economy." It's not. We buy far more things than we export. Yes, we do. We do export some good stuff, but we're not exporting nearly enough to maintain the balance of trade. So I think we'll have to give a penalty to New Zealand there.
Okay. Yep.
The next bit that I wanted to look at, and this is always, I think, quite an important factor of the cushion that people have if you see a recession, and that's the household savings rate. The household savings rate in New Zealand has been negative since, well, it's been negative for the last 3 years, running at minus 2.8% in 2017, minus 1.3% in 2016, minus 1.5% in 2015. Prior to that, we had 2010 to 2014, where there was a minuscule growth in the household savings ratio, but actually, to be fair, 0.5% in 2013 and 0.1% in 2014. It's negligible. We're not saving any money, so households don't have a cushion in the event of a credit squeeze. And that, I think, is something that we really do need to factor in. This astonished me. Ireland, however, have had positive household savings since 2000.
Wow.
So even though they went through this big credit bubble and households were saving money, the savings ratio only actually fell below 5% in 2007, which was the year that it all turned to custard. So yeah, I think a penalty for New Zealand on sadly not saving enough money.
Okay.
Unemployment rates. This is quite an interesting one because whenever you have these credit expansions, you tend to find that the unemployment levels drop off. More goods and services are bought with debt, and that allows the buying of more other goods and services. Unemployment rates in Ireland were low, just over 4% in 2008. They'd been on the decline throughout their boom period. They rose to 16% by 2012. Now, this is not to scare anybody. New Zealand's unemployment rate has just dropped below 4%. And that could be an indicative signal of the end of a credit cycle. I don't think it'll go any lower, because you've always got a lot of people who, for whatever reason, can't work, don't want to work. Very interesting. I'm going to have to, I guess, look at that and say 3-all, because it's a positive that we've got such low unemployment at the moment, but it is a precursor normally of something else. And what, just for those that don't know how reserve banks think, when you have got a very, very loose mobility in the labour market, there is often that desire from a central bank to raise interest rates so that they don't have these wage pressures creating internal inflation. Just look back at the US 2015-16, unemployment got very, very low, interest rates started to rise. So historically, that has been a tool that reserve banks have used to calm down wage demands. We're actually getting a lot of strikes in New Zealand at the moment. A lot of public sector strikes happening. We've had the teachers. I've got a day off with the children tomorrow, which I'm looking forward to. And that is a typical sign of people thinking everything's too expensive. I can't afford it. I need more money. So these wage demands will come in the public sector. They'll also come in the private sector. Did we score that?
3 each.
Each. Average house price in Ireland in 2007 was €350,000. I'm going to read this from the Irish Times, which was published on the 14th of August 2018. The latest figures mean that house prices nationally are now 19.5% lower than their peak in 2007, while in Dublin, prices are 22.2% lower than their February 2007 peak. Across the rest of the state, prices are 24.2% of their May 2007 peak. While prices may still be some way off the Celtic Tiger highs, they have rebounded substantially from the trough of early 2013. So that's six years that they went from peak to trough. Figures from the CSO show that prices nationally have increased by 79.6%, with Dublin prices almost doubling, up by 92.7% from their February 2012 lows. Now, I've got lots of people who around the market saying, house prices double, house prices double. They may double, but after they've rebased. I can't see them doubling from where they are today. New Zealand average house price in New Zealand in 2007 was 350,000 New Zealand dollars, 350,000 euros in Ireland, $350,000 in New Zealand. And in 2018, the median average house price in New Zealand nationally is 562,000 New Zealand dollars. To put that into context, the UK, which is a very, very large economy with a housing shortage on the edge of Europe and between American and European markets, had an average house price of £227,000 in April of this year. If you convert that at a generous exchange rate of 2 New Zealand dollars to the pound, New Zealand house prices are overvalued, and I'll let our readership make their decision. So from my view, we've talked about it in our last post, and we talked about how the credit expansion that happened in Europe, in England, in Ireland, stopped and slowed down in 2007 because banks were regulated. They had to go and they gradually restricted the availability of credit, who can get it, how much equity people need, the household debt to income ratios being brought down from 7 times household income down to 4.5 at best today, and particularly in England. We've allowed this to carry on from what should have been an orderly correction in 2007, 8, 9, 10, and the market did slow, But what we didn't do is control our banking sector. And when you've seen 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times interest-only debt, the foreign buyers providing that marginal cash injection that locals have had to compete with, I'm going to have to give that final one on house prices to New Zealand as a penalty.
Okay. Good.
So I think that's the end of the matchup.
All right.
I'm looking forward to the game at the weekend. What's been the result here?
So that's 21 to New Zealand and 9, 12, 15 to Ireland. So I declare New Zealand the outright winner or loser, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all we're doing is shedding a light on things, Martin. And I don't want people to be scared. From my perspective, there's a lot of things that we can do to work through whatever challenge comes ahead. I think that anybody who has been encouraging their 20-year-old, 30-year-old child into the market at the moment, please read this post. Please share it with family members. I don't want to scare everybody, but I think that it's important that our eyes are wide open as we make these big decisions that in Ireland have affected people for the last decade, and I think that none of us want our own family members to be hamstrung by bad decisions because they're not being informed.
No, good point. And in fact, there's a post which I'll put a link up to a discussion that I had with regard to Ireland, so people can actually learn more about what happened in Ireland. And I think it's a very interesting observation that you've made there, Joseph, is that some of those dimensions look very similar to where Ireland was. So that is a bit of a warning, as you say, don't panic, but it's important people understand that, expansion of credit lifts home prices, reduction of credit makes home prices fall. The marginal buyer moving out of the market makes prices fall. Prices do not always go up.
I think that's the message that we need to share.
Good to talk to you, Joseph. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you.
So there you have it. A bit of a warning there from New Zealand, but I think it's relevant to Australia too. Remember that home prices do not always go up. It is a function of the market, it is a function of credit availability and the marginal buyer. As those things change, so do prices. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Thanks for watching. See you next time.